Hey there, it's CJ Willie and I'm cracking a pack. Today is pack 23 in my science project of cracking a 1990 top Cello box. Check out my preview video for the explanation on how this science project will test the theory to see if I can build a complete set from a Cello box. I've added a link to my preview video in the description below. With all the packs that I crack, I will share my thoughts and memories about some of the players or cards. After I've cracked the pack, I'm going to choose the best card of the pack. Doesn't mean it has to be a rookie, superstar, or Hall of Famer. It can be, a funny photo, something interesting about the player, maybe some memory I had of the player from back in the day. So we are down to our last two packs, 23 and 24. Last one's coming up. Let's see, today is Tuesday, so on Thursday, last pack, and then we'll have the review video with the analysis. So far, we are just missing, I think out of the big rookies, still Bernie Williams and Marquise Grissom. Been fortunate enough to pull some of the other really good rookies in the set. So check out the previous videos to see what we've pulled thus far. All right, first card out of the pack is Mike Maddux. So older brother of Greg Maddux. Came up as a starting pitcher and then spent a number of years as a reliever. I think he's more renowned. Finally got out of the spotlight or under the, Greg Maddux's brother, kind of being known by, and he's a major league pitching coach, has had quite a bit of success. He's currently a pitching coach with the St. Louis Cardinals. Chris Spire was a utility infielder, began his career early on as a starting shortstop infielder. By the time the 80s came around, he bounced around as a utility player, Cubs, Giants, Cardinals, Twins. He spent some time with the Rangers, Yankees, number of different teams. Had a pretty lengthy career. Fun fact, I actually worked with the sister-in-law of Chris Spire. So kind of an interesting fact. Small world, I guess. Kevin Mitchell, all-star card. Mitchell burst onto the scene in the late 80s as a power hitter with the Giants. Came up as a rookie with the Mets. And then went, I believe, to the Padres, then the Giants. My memory of Kevin Mitchell is always going to be him running toward the left field corner, reaching up, barehanded, caught a foul ball off of Ozzie Smith. Checklist card featuring Atlanta, Baltimore, Boston, and Chicago, California. So the first, looky there. Checklist number 1, checklist number 2. Not much to say about that. Kevin Bass, spent a number of years as a starting outfielder with the Astros, part of their 1986 National League West championship team. Jose Gonzalez came up as a backup outfielder. He was a kind of a star, if you will, a quad 4A star. Could really hit well and play well at AAA, but never translated to the big leagues. Louis Meadows came up as a prospect with the Astros, maybe the Cubs. I don't remember quite off the top of my head. No Astros. I think he moved on to the Cubs. Once again, another player like Jose Gonzalez couldn't make it in the major leagues. All-star card of Eric Davis. I really liked Eric Davis quite a bit. If he wasn't so injury prone, he had all-around talent. I actually think he was a better athletic outfielder than Darryl Strawberry. Unlike Strawberry, Davis could hit for power and speed. And if injuries didn't get in the way, he would have been a 30-30, 40-40 player. 30 home runs, 30 steals, 40 home runs, 40 steals for the majority of his career. Had a lengthy career, suffered cancer later on in his career and overcame that. Greg Jeffries, finally getting that Topps Rookie Cup. Jeffries had a ton of promise. Didn't really end up making much out of that promise. He was a starter for a number of years. He could hit for average. Couldn't hit for a ton of power, but definitely a doubles average guy. Bounced around defensively. Wasn't the greatest defensive player. Finally settled in on first base. Spent some time as a DH as well. Had a pretty good run if you look later on in his career with the Royals, Cardinals, and Phillies, where he perennially hit above 300, but once again, not with a ton of power. Bruce Ruffin came up and had a couple of decent years as a starting pitcher, then spent the majority of his career as a reliever, lefty reliever. Richard Dotson, he was part of the 1983 Chicago White Sox American League West Championship team, who got steamrolled by the Orioles as the Orioles went on to win the World Series in '83. It's one of my earlier memories of baseball. I remember watching the American League Championship Series between the White Sox and Orioles, and Dotson had a great year, both he and Lamar Hoyt, but the Orioles just pounded them in the championship series. Bob Knepper, originally with the Astros, maybe a different team before then. He was an all-star at one point. This card always cracks me up. Knepper's probably around 34, 35 maybe. This card makes him look like he's 50. Pale, pasty complexion, kind of a crappy mustache. This looks like it was airbrushed. I want to say this was probably a late season trade from the Astros to the Giants. Yeah, not even a trade. Looks like the Astros released him and the Giants picked him up in August for their stretch run as they went on to win the National League West in '89. Yeah, long career. Oh yeah, I guess he started with the Giants, Astros, and then right back to the Giants. Born in '54. So yeah, he's 35 years old on this card. Makes him look like he's 50. Frank Tanana, early on in his career was a fireballer, and then later on in his career was a finesse pitcher. He ended up with, I want to say, close to 200 wins, but was mainly a 500 pitcher because he spent a number of years on some teams that weren't great. The Angels when they were awful, the Rangers when they were awful. The Tigers were a pretty good team, and you can see that he had a much better career. But in 1990, this card, he had 198 wins and 188 losses with a relatively low ERA, 3.49. Jim Clancy was a member of the original 1977 Blue Jays, spent a number of years with them, and then finished out his career with the Astros. May have finished out his career with the Reds. I'm not 100% sure on that. This is unique. I don't think we've got this ad card yet for the Topps magazine. I don't even remember if I subscribed to the Topps magazine back in the day. Probably wasn't even worth it. John Smiley, starting pitcher with the Pirates. It was part of their run to the playoffs in the late 90s, late 80s, early 90s. Gus Polidor, utility infielder, Angels, Brewers, a couple other teams like that. Gary Templeton started out with my Cardinals. He was part of the trade that sent Templeton to the Padres, and the Cardinals got the Wizard, Ozzie Smith. I love that deal. Being a Cardinals fan, Ozzie Smith was just fantastic. Templeton was a great player in his own right. With the Cardinals, I can't remember if it was 79 or 80, he had 100 hits from the left side of the plate and 100 hits from the right side of the plate. He didn't endear himself to the fans in St. Louis in, I think it was 1981, late in the season. He had a rough game, an error, maybe struck out, didn't run out a ground ball to first base, got booed by the fans, which is really hard for Cardinal fans to do. On his way to the dugout, he decided to give the good old double bird to the fans. Whitey Herzog had to come and pull him off the field, and end of the year he got traded to St. Louis, and the rest is, or San Diego, and the rest is history. Paul O'Neill came up with the Reds. Later on, moved to the Yankees, where he spent a number of years with the Yankees and their World Series teams. Paul O'Neill reminded me of like the hard-nosed, do-it-the-right-way baseball player. Shane Rowley, I believe he came up with the Mariners, spent some time with the Phillies and Twins as a lefty starting pitcher. Kevin Gross. I don't even know if his last name is Gross or if it's Gross. I'm not even entirely sure. I just remember as a kid always calling him Kevin Gross. He was pretty much a 500 pitcher for the Expos. Had some success with Expos, and I also think the Phillies. I'm pretty sure his career record was around 500. Yeah, 71 and 78? Yep, Phillies and Expos, pretty much your run-of-the-mill 500 starter. Tony La Russa, Hall of Fame manager, began with the White Sox, moved to the A's, and then on to the Cardinals. Went to the playoffs with the White Sox, didn't make it to the World Series in '83, steamrolled by the Orioles. Went to the World Series 3 straight years with the A's, 88, 89, and 90. Lost to the Dodgers and Orel Hershiser in 88. Won in 89 in the Earthquake Series against the Giants, and then lost to the Reds. If I remember right, got swept in 4 straight games by the underdog Reds. With the Cardinals, went to World Series in 2004 and lost to the Red Sox. Won in 2006 against the Tigers, and then won in the Epic Series against the Rangers in 2011. So, Hall of Fame manager for sure. Juan Samuel, I remember when he came up with the Phillies, 1984, came out like a lightning bolt. Hit for a high average, stole a ton of bases, seemed like he was going to be a great fielder. He held his own and was a starter at second base for a number of years with the Phillies, then the Mets. His problem, he didn't hit for the high average like he did when he first broke onto the scene, and he struck out a ton. Dave Henderson, My favorite memory of Dave Henderson, 1986 Red Sox against the Angels in the playoffs championship series. It looked like the Angels were going to win game, I want to say it was game 5. They were going to clinch and move on to the World Series. Henderson comes up. I can't remember if he came up as a pinch hitter earlier in the game, but he eventually hit a go-ahead 3-run home run off of Donnie Moore. Red Sox gained the momentum, won the next 2 games, went into the World Series against the Mets. Unfortunately, Donnie Moore never regained his stuff and committed suicide years later. A lot of people point out to that as kind of the turning point. Lenny Dykstra, crook, criminal. I never liked Lenny Dykstra. His nickname in his playing days was Dirt. He was a dirty dude, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. I think he's still in jail. Okay, next card is Jay Bell. This is one of Jay Bell's early cards. Came up as an infielder with the Pirates. Shortstop, was pretty successful for them. My memory was he was part of the 2001 Diamondbacks World Series championship team. Instrumental cog. Funny thing was Bell didn't hit for a ton of average or power. All of a sudden he goes to the Diamondbacks, hits a bunch of home runs, hits for average. You know, there are a lot of rumors, possible steroids, but I think a lot of people forget. And in Arizona, the ball flies. You can see that in spring training, and I think that he got a power boost simply by playing in Arizona. Roger Craig, manager card. He spent a number of years as a pitcher. Cardinals, Giants. It wasn't until he became the manager of the Giants, he was previously a pitching coach, that he taught a lot of his pitchers the split finger fastball, which kind of coincidentally enough, on the other side of the bay, Oakland, a lot of their pitchers were learning how to throw the split finger fastball. And it's funny how in 1989, both Bay teams made it to the World Series, with the Oakland A's winning in 4 games in the Bay Quake World Series. Bob Denier originally came up, I want to say, with the Cubs, kind of as a platoon outfielder guy, moved on to the Phillies. Harold Reynolds, probably in today's world, most people know him as a studio analyst with the MLB Network. He came up and was a pretty good second baseman with the Mariners. Was an all-star for a few years. Great fielder. Wasn't the best hitter. You know, usually around 275 average. Few hits. But, you know, bottom of the lineup, sturdy kind of defensive infielder. Okay, last couple of cards. Jack McKeon, manager with the Padres. He also managed the Reds. And our final card is Mark Eichhorn. Came up with the Blue Jays. Had some success as middle reliever. Pretty much that was his gig, was a middle reliever type guy. Blue Jays, Braves. As you can see, in 86 and 87, he was your prototypical vulture, getting a lot of wins in relief and a handful of saves. Okay, best card or favorite card out of the pack. For me, you know, I think I'm going to go with this Bob Knepper. You know, I already spent a ton of time talking about, you know, he's only 35 years old, but he looks like he's 50 in here. I don't know what it was about the 60s, 70s, or 80s. You would look at cards of players, and, you know, they're in their mid-30s, but they look like they are ancient. I think there are a couple of things going. One, there wasn't a lot of conditioning, and I think that guys didn't take care of their bodies like they do nowadays. You see a lot of players into weightlifting, they're into nutrition, and, you know, they're able to sustain their playing career and look quite a bit younger. Maybe steroids in the 80s and 90s kept guys younger. I don't know. But you see a lot of players in 70s and 80s that look like they're 50 and 60. I mean, I'm looking at you, Don Sutton, the Necro brothers, Charlie Huff. I mean, you can go down the list of guys that just looked ancient, but you know, they're about 29 or 30, and maybe it was the combination of poor conditioning. You know, they smoked, they drank, and, you know, baseball is just a hobby to them. Anyway, I hope you liked the video. If you did like it, please subscribe and share. Take some time in the comment section to tell me what your favorite card or best card of the pack was. Okay, until next time when I crack the final pack number 24 from my 1990 Top Cello box. Remember, I'm doing this for science.